Hello there folks, and welcome to Bullets for Bucks. Today we're going to compare the Ruger American Gen 2 against the Savage 110. Now this comparison will also be applicable to the 111 because they're essentially the same rifle, just one is a long action and one is a short action. I do have the original stocks for both rifles, which we will be going over in detail, but these are both right now in aftermarket Wooks stocks. Okay, we are going to shoot Ruger Gen 2 at 200 yards, 300, and then we'll go 4. We'll just go 1.5 MOA for 200, just that parallax, the middle gong there. All right, first round hit. Velocity on that, 2755 again. All right, 300 yards, Ruger American Gen 2. We're gonna go 4 MOA. 150 grain SSTs are flying good out of this gun. We'll go on the circle all the way to the left. First round hit. Velocity on that was 2750. All right, 400 yards, Ruger American Gen 2. I'm actually guessing holdover. Hitting them though. All right, so let's start with the receiver on the Ruger American. It's made of metal, it's all one piece. It has a Cerakote finish on it, which is nice to reduce rust and corrosion. It does have a side push lever bolt release and a 70-degree bolt throw. Pulling out the bolt, you will see it has 3 locking lugs, a plunger ejector, a removable bolt handle so you can swap that out with a large tactical knob, and it does have a aluminum shroud over the end here, as well as a cocked indicator at the rear. The bolt does appear to be relatively polished. It does have a little tiny Sacco style extractor, and it has that plunger ejector. It's a very hefty made bolt. It's got some weight to it. They improved over the Gen 1. The zipper sound is essentially gone. It's pretty smooth and fluid, actually feels pretty premium compared to the Gen 1. Has a 3-position safety all the way to the rear, locks the bolt in place. 1 forward, you can unlock the bolt, and all the way forward, you can fire. It does feature the Ruger Marksman trigger, which is very similar to the Savage Accu trigger in my opinion. Has a center blade, curved, and is adjustable, but this one really didn't want to adjust for me, so something to take note of. The receiver on this has 2 recesses in it in the bottom, and it marries up or sits and butts up against 2 metal pieces in the stock. So it doesn't have a recoil lug between the barrel and the receiver like a Remington. Now coming forward to the Savage 110, the receiver on this very much looks like a piece of bar stock that's been machined. A lot less machining than the Ruger American. Doesn't have cuts on it to reduce weight or anything like that. It can come Cerakoted or have different coatings depending on the model. That's one thing to note, is the Ruger American's available in the standard, Ranch, and Predator version. The Savage has tons of different variants, so it's a little bit hard to compare these two sometimes. The Savage does not have a 70-degree throw like the Ruger. It has a 90-degree throw, and sometimes that can cause issues when you're operating the bolt if you have a large magnification ring on your scope or it's mounted low. To remove the bolt on the Savage is a little bit trickier. You have to essentially dry fire it and then push in this release tab in front of the trigger guard and then pull the bolt straight back. The bolt on it, however, has a really nice polish job, and it's jeweled, which I absolutely love. It has a floating bolt head. This can allow this to essentially true itself more than a non-floating bolt head. It has a little extractor built into one of the lugs on the bolt, kind of similar to Ruger. Has a plunger ejector. The handle on this you can remove, but it's definitely not as easy to remove in my opinion. It does have a knurled bolt knob, not really a prominent cocked indicator. To put the bolt back in, push down on the trigger and it'll slide right in. It does ride very smooth in the receiver. The bolt lift got a little bit of a secondary catch compared to the Ruger, but they're both equally smooth at this point. Definitely a lot smoother than the Ruger American Gen 1. The safety on this locks the bolt all the way to the rear. It's a tang safety. One forward, you can unlock the bolt, but you can't fire. All the way forward, you can fire. The trigger on this, the Accu trigger from Savage, very similar to the Ruger American, but actually I prefer it, and this one adjusted appropriately. So in my opinion, slightly better than the Ruger American Gen 2 trigger still. The tang safety, however, has a very cheap plasticky feel to it and doesn't feel nearly as premium as the Ruger American Gen 2. I flinched on that last one. It likes that 150 SSTs, I believe. Probably right at 3/4 MOA, maybe 1 MOA. Shooting good, sub MOA. All right, so the recoil lug on the Savage is essentially sandwiched between the barrel and the receiver, kind of like a Remington 700. I definitely prefer the bedding of the Savage over the Ruger, and let's get into why. Here's the original Ruger standard stock. Pretty cheap polymer, adjustable length of pull, nice soft recoil pad, built-in comb riser, and then two V-blocks essentially that the front and rear action screw marry up against, and then it has ribbing and down the front for reinforcement and standard sling swivel studs. It is free floated. It does come with a separate piece that is the magazine well. You have to remove a roll pin essentially and a little mag release lever right here to remove it out of the stock, at least to make it easy you have to. This Savage 110 in particular was the older classic version with a walnut stock. They come with so many different stock combinations with Savage, you can't really compare there, but I did like that it was metal pillar bedded and had that front large recoil lug sandwiched between the barrel and the receiver, and it was free floated with standard sling swivel studs. As far as stocks, I'm not gonna really say one is better than the other, because I will say this, with Savage, there's a lot more options out there than Ruger right now as far as factory configurations with different stocks or chassis. So I will say that, but they're generally roughly the same quality and have similar issues in general. I know we can go back and forth about that all day long. They both can come with different length barrels. They both can come with Cerakote. They both can come with threaded barrels from the factory. One thing to note though is that all the Ruger American Gen 2s now come with this beautiful spiral flute job on the barrel. They all come with a muzzle brake as far as I know, and they do come threaded, which is kind of nice, and Cerakoted, whereas not all the Savage 110s or 111s do. All right, let's go to the range and see how these perform. All right, we got the new Ruger Gen 2 in 308 Winchester, the new Vortex Viper HD 3-15 by 44, shooting 975 yards, 28 MOA of elevation here, almost zero wind hold today. All right, here we go. Ready? I flinched. All right, so now that we're back from the range, I gotta say, they both shot roughly, in my opinion, about the same. Now, given a very small sample size of ammunition, I can't definitively say one is inherently more accurate than the other. Not only that, but I have one of each, right, to test from, so that's not a lot of variable. I think that they're both equally capable of accuracy. In general, you hear that Savage 110s, 111s shoot really good. And in general, you hear that Ruger Americans shoot really good now. I think that a lot of the problems with the Gen 1 were that the bolt was really zippery sounding and ran rough in the receiver, and there were some feeding issues. Well, I still have heard complaints and experienced some issues with getting the mag in and out on the Ruger American Gen 2. And well, they have added a 3-position safety, which I like, and spiral fluted the barrel, and done some other things that are nice. It's still not a premium firearm. The Savage 110, the magazine on this particular one works flawlessly, and I really like the system actually. It's not any more expensive per se, but it works great. Both of these in particular models came with plastic trigger guards and plastic mag wells. It is what it is, right? And you can get the Savage with metal though, depending on the model. At the end of the day, I would say that both are very, very comparable. You have a shorter bolt throw with the Ruger American, which is nice, and you have a higher quality tang safety, in my opinion. Both feature barrel nuts, so you can swap out the barrels. Both are, in my opinion, about a mid-level rifle where you're going to have mid-level problems, which is sometimes you're going to have QC issues, sometimes you're going to have feeding issues, sometimes you're going to have magazine issues, sometimes you're going to have accuracy issues. In general, though, I would have to say I've been more happy with my Savage 110 than my Ruger American Gen 2. It feeds a little smoother. I like the bolt feel a little bit better, and the magazine just simply functions better for me, and I haven't had any issues with feeding or ejection or putting the magazine in and out. On the Ruger American Gen 2, if you put the magazine in with your bolt forward, it really doesn't want to seat and can really be difficult to seat and fall out. Is something with my particular one, which I do not like at all. I don't have that problem with the Savage. Now, let's go ahead and see what the weight of the Savage trigger is from the factory. It's at 3.5 on the Savage. Now let's test the Ruger American. It's literally virtually the same at 3.5. All right, pros and cons of the Savage. The bolt runs very smoothly. It's jeweled. I like the trigger just a little bit more. Feels a little bit crisper and cleaner and adjusted according to specs. And in my experience, Savages have shot consistently very accurately, and it's available in tons of different configurations from the factory. Cons of the Savage would be that the receiver doesn't look as machined, it doesn't look as perfected, it doesn't always come Cerakoted. The cocked indicator is not really existent on it. It has a 90-degree bolt throw, which can be a problem, like I said, with a large magnification ring or a low-mounted scope. The tang safety feels extremely cheap, and it doesn't come spiral fluted in base configurations. But that said, very accurate rifle, and I like the bedding system of it. And I haven't had any issues with the magazine system, with it feeding or extracting, like I have with some Rugers. Pros and cons of the Ruger are it has a little bit higher quality feeling safety, 70-degree bolt throw, larger tactical bolt knob, and comes Cerakoted, is spiral fluted, and includes a muzzle brake. Cons are I've experienced issues putting the magazine in and getting it to seat with the bolt forward. The trigger didn't want to adjust according to factory specs, and accuracy was just okay out of the Ruger American Gen 2. Also, it's not available in as many configurations. Anyways, both are fantastic mid-level rifles with their flaws. The decision is yours. Hope you enjoyed this review and comparison of the Ruger American Gen 2 versus the Savage 110 and 111. Thanks for watching Bullets for Bucks. Check out this next video and subscribe.